So today we're going to talk about how you, as head of Fridays for Future, a global climate movement in Toronto, use technology, in particular social media, among other things, to help you um, manage your activism. So, tell us a little bit about how that works, what different media you use, to what different audiences, and if you've learned anything along the way in terms of what works best.
Right. So at Fridays for Future Toronto, we had since the very beginning been using Slack as one of the biggest tools to organize
This is an
because
internal tool, internal
it's
communication.
an internal tool exactly because we were a team that was growing. We initially also used a lot of emails because we were organizing with older folks, but we realized there was a big generational divide around the email use. People used to send very long emails that were not manageable, and so Slack kind of forces you to keep things condensed and clear because it just you can see it when it's a huge thing. So Slack was one of our big tools even before the pandemic.
Did you find adoption of Slack was easy among your older audience, or did you lose some of your older audience when you switched to Slack?
Well, we had a transition anyways, because this wasn't about our audience; it was about our internal
Yes, when I
organizers.
mean audience, I mean your yes, your
Yeah.
your fellow activists. Yes.
So, I mean, I don't think we lost them because of that. We decided to separate eventually to have two groups that collaborate instead of one big group.
Okay.
But I would say, in general, there is a bit of a divide with Slack or tools like this where some people are just not able to learn as easily to use it. It's not that intuitive. And so we've had a few trainings internally. Whenever we onboard new people, we kind of walk them through Slack because you can really see some young people really easily get on it, and some young people also struggle with it a lot.
Mm.
And I've been told that depending on folks that have more like ADHD or things like that might struggle with it much more than other people. So I've been learning a lot about these platforms and accessibility and things like that. But essentially, it's not a given that because they're young they're going to know how to learn Slack.
Right.
Not a given at
Oh,
all.
that's really interesting about Slack because I may be slightly ADHD because I have issues with Slack myself. I
I mean,
prefer
I don't.
I prefer email. I get sort of overwhelmed by this series of threads that shows up on
Right.
the page. I don't know where to go. So
Interesting. Yeah, I've heard that from a lot of people, but that was one of the big tools we've used since the very beginning. We also had Zoom from the beginning before the pandemic, just because we were organizing with other people in Montreal or in BC or whatever. So we've always used Zoom, but obviously now with the pandemic, it's our only way to meet and organize.
yeah.
Although once in a while, we also use a tool called Jitsi when we need to organize in for actions that we want to make sure are very confidential. Just
So
because,
that's Jitsi, Jitsi, which is
yeah,
a really what we call private by design video conferencing tool.
exactly. Um, and then obviously for external organizing, social media is a huge part of what we do, especially since the pandemic, because we haven't had as many in-person actions. We can't really go into schools and speak, so a lot of the work is actually online
Yeah.
through conferences, through YouTube lives, and through social media. With Instagram really being our biggest platform. Twitter and Facebook, we kind of do them because we feel the need to have a presence, but it's really not what's driving our numbers or new members. And then TikTok being one that I'm much less involved in than some of the younger team members that are running the TikTok much better than I am.
So you're already too old for TikTok, right?
Yeah, I yesterday, and I can send you the picture. It's a funny picture to show on this video if we want. I took a selfie with some of the young people at one of our strikes, and they made fun of me because apparently selfies are kind of an old people thing already.
Oh
So I realized
wow.
that even in a youth movement, I'm the old youth.
Oh my gosh, that's funny. So
Yeah,
so what do young people do now if they're not doing selfies anymore?
I don't know, TikToks. I guess I wouldn't know. I'm not young
Okay.
anymore.
Oh my gosh, it's tough, isn't it? In
Yeah.
today's world. Oh my gosh. All right. So and when you say so you use Instagram, and so how did you organize your team to have do, do you how do you decide, your
Oh,
editorial content on Instagram, for example, if we're going to take that one as an example?
we've had we've had a big evolution from the beginning where it was really whoever was able to in the team. At some point, I remember doing it, and I really much don't like that aspect of organizing, but sometimes you just have to do it. But in the past, I would say year or so, actually, in the past year since the pandemic, we've really professionalized it, I would say, or even a little before. We had an official social media coordinator whose name was Sophie, and she did a really good job to start kind of implementing a like schedule and kind of look at the analytics. And then we started having two coordinators for the social media team because it was big, it was getting bigger.
Yeah.
And they started having, a whole team with an aspect of, content creation. So some people would write the posts because we need to do the research, because a lot of our posts are not just pictures of strikes, they're researched posts on the effects of climate change on minorities in Canada. There are things that you actually have to research.
Right.
And then we have more of the graphics aspect. So sometimes it's the same person that does both, sometimes they divide it. And then there's another aspect that's just making sure that we constantly have in our story, you know, posting other people's posts. And so, yeah, we do have those two co coordinators, plus a team of people that are writing the content, and some folks that are also just involved. For example, if you have a working group, you send the information from the working group to the social media team, who will then kind of repackage it for the social media. So it's quite a lot of work that they're doing for
Right.
this aspect.
Yeah, interesting. And so you just said that the type of post that you produce may be informational
Yes,
posts, I would say. And then you do have, of course, some pictures of your strikes. I
yes,
saw this great post just recently. This is in March that we're talking, where you showed different images of your different strikes since 2019. I think when you were
yeah.
involved with organizing Fridays for Future Toronto, and then including when you started to go online for your strikes, where one of your activists was holding a sign and saying, "We won't back down from organizing."
Hmm.
So actually, that helps me get to, and that's actually my question about that was, how what else do you decide to publish, like in addition to
Mm,
informational content and visuals of your strikes, and you
right.
posting other people's content. How much of that do you do? Do you have a set idea of how much you do that? Or do you use some of these like feel good posts sometimes as well that tend to be prevalent on Instagram? Or do you decide to shy away from that and not do so much of that?
So I think it has evolved because what Instagram values has evolved, and we have again like Sophie and Cooper, and now it's Cooper and Alia who are doing this, and they're looking at the analytics. And before, we noticed that what did really well was pictures with faces, and
Yeah.
so for a while we would post a lot more with faces. And then for a few months, we infographics. So these posts that say 10 reasons why blah blah, or just infographics, so text-based things
Yeah.
did much better. So we switched to that, and now infographics are, I think, kind of we saturated completely, and so I don't really know what the next thing is going to be. Video doesn't seem to be doing that well, but in all cases, we do kind of follow trends, because social media is not our end goal. We really need to use it as a tool to reach more people, and so that's why we follow trends much more, is because we have less of an editorial line maybe than a newspaper. Because what we do is not produce content. What we do in the end is mobilize young people, educate them. The social media is really still the tool.
Right.
Um, I would say, I don't know what you mean by the feel good ones, but I would say we do repost other people's uh, posts when they're like relevant, or where we think we couldn't have created a better one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure what you mean by the feel good one.
Well, the feel good is, this post that says, that's, basically, you're not feeling good today, but tomorrow is another day.
Right.
You'll feel better. So
No.
it's sort of like empathy, where
Mm.
you're just buying.
Motivational quotes.
Yeah, yeah.
No, we
You
really
don't,
don't do
you
this much. No, I think we're pretty mindful that we post frequently enough. And no, I don't think we do that too much. It's not really the goal. Yeah.
yeah, that can be abused by some other accounts. And And so you've really seen that be helpful as a recruitment tool for you. Have you really seen your audience grow thanks to Instagram posting?
It's hard to imply causality in this case, but it's certain that at least during the pandemic, how people got to us in the end was through that Instagram. We have the link on how to become a member through the Instagram. It doesn't mean that they didn't reach us some other way. Sometimes, you'll go speak at presentations and you'll say, stay in touch with us through our social media. And then that might be the step. So maybe they don't find us through there. Maybe they see us on TV, look us up and find the social media, but it's been a good bridge, I would say. I'm not even sure it's how they got involved in the first place, how they heard of us, but I do think it's kind of a natural reflex of young people is finding the social media account. And then
Yeah,
sometimes they just DM it and ask, how do I join,
right. Oh yeah, the DM part. Yeah, that could be interesting because I get the impression that you're almost more focused on social media than your website in terms of updating the
I
content.
would say so. Yeah, I would definitely say so. Often we realize a few days before a campaign that we haven't properly updated the website. And that's definitely, I think, because ourselves, we never check websites. We just use social media. And so I think it's just a bias that we have as a
Yeah,
generation.
yeah. And so with the strikes not being able to be held in person as much these days, everybody's talking about, tech, like Zoom, is helping us stay connected. How
Mm,
have you then switched gears to stay connected with all, the people sympathetic to the Fridays for Future cause through
right.
technology? And have you seen some difficulties in implementing that, or how have you tried to make it as close as possible to the real experience, which was really, of course, an
Right.
additional time for people to bond and get together?
So I think initially, in April, right after that we started, we did just try to recreate the same idea. We took a strike and we put it online. We would make people, tweet live during the thing. We would have our musicians. We would Zoom in some of our speakers. We really tried that. And then over the summer, we had a team working on weekly actions, and they still do actually. So every single week, usually on a Friday, it would vary. We would have some sort of live YouTube with speakers, and it was just a lot of content as well. And I think eventually we started transitioning away from that, realizing you can't recreate what you're creating in a strike. And a strike is not a conference. A lot of the point of a strike was physically blocking infrastructure, physically seeing people that wouldn't otherwise see you,
Yeah,
right? When I go in the street and I have a bypasser that all of a sudden reads my sign, this is an interaction. And social media or Zoom conferences don't allow for that, because to join the Zoom conference, you have to be really motivated. You have to sign up and go to that Zoom and remember and
yeah,
actually sit there in front of your computer. And so I think we realized we weren't going to be able to have the same effect. And so we kind of transitioned, I would say, to creating valuable content, not in a live form anymore, but just in like those little webcasts or just YouTube videos, um, to kind of allow people to find resources easily. So, it will be like how to make sure you're not burning out in your activism, or why do we speak about climate justice when we talk about climate. So it's more informational videos that are meant to be consulted anytime. And it took away from the striking part. And I'll be honest, a lot of us have felt as though that was very difficult, because what motivated us in the first place to be active is feeling like you're making a change. And when you post a YouTube video, you really don't feel at that moment like you're making a change. You might be or you might not, but either way, there's
there's
no
no
feeling.
direct impact. Yeah.
Exactly. So I would say, yeah, we kind of started shifting, and then we eventually went back to organizing very COVID safe and very occasional in-person actions. We had one um, yesterday, so March 19th. We had one in September, and then we had a few in between for Indigenous solidarity events. But we started realizing, there's nothing like physically being in the street to express discontent. In the end, that's irreplaceable, I think.
Yeah, it's quite different. I know you're quite active on Twitter yourself. You're
Yes.
saying it's not as used by your for Fridays for Future. Uh,
Yeah.
so tell me a little bit about your use of Twitter and what Twitter represents for you.
Yeah, and I laugh about it because it's quite a known thing amongst my friends or my family members or even my professors that I do tweet quite rapidly, and it's not a premeditated treat. It's really I use it like it was intended, as a spontaneous thought that comes to my mind and I put it out. I personally like Twitter a lot, first of all, because the community that I have there are a mix of climate scientists that I would have never had access to before, professors and very, very qualified people that I would have otherwise, again, never had access to, and then other young people across the world doing the same work I do. So that's kind of the community I have.
Right. So
Um,
it's more of a really expert community, basically.
yes,
Community that,
expert and on the ground, but around the same topic.
right.
And I always, sometimes I want to kind of branch out and tweet about something else than either like climate or youth or economics, which is my usual stuff. And the tweet totally flops. And I realize that I really have a niche community because they don't care about anything else. If I
Right.
try humor, it doesn't work at all.
That's very true about Twitter. I've seen that myself. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's not at all like Facebook where you can talk about a lot of
anything.
small things and
No, no.
just post
But
something funny.
I've used Twitter, especially recently, to also as a community. So I'll ask, hey, any resources about this? Or, oh, I'm just reading, recently I tweeted, oh, I'm reading about donut economics, would love to start something in Toronto. And then two or three people said, well, I'm going to link you to this other person. So in the end, it also is really acting as a social
Yeah.
media this time.
Yeah. 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 It's a place to find people, I think. It's
Yeah,
really,
definitely.
yeah.
And actually, journalists and media find me, or even people that want me to speak at their conferences, I usually get DMs through Twitter about these opportunities.
And what do you say to people who say that a lot of young people today practice what is called slacktivism? So they're
Mm,
on social media, they repost, they like, they comment, but they really don't go out or do something really active in the end. How do you
right.
respond to that?
I think there has to be a nuanced response to this. And the first one is I always want to look at the person asking the question and tell them, do you do anything? Because if the person admits that they don't even do anything, I say, I don't think you're the right person to comment on this. So we do have a lot of people that will comment and tell us, oh, what you're doing is not enough. And I'll tell them, what have you been doing? And it's absolutely nothing. So I think that's the first, is who the comment comes from matters a lot.
Yeah.
But I have seen, and that's true, um, what I like to call performative activism more than slacktivism, because Slack
Right.
kind of makes it sound like people are lazy or something like that. I think it's deeper than that, in a sense that it's not understanding what it's really going to take, and wanting to show others that it's really a social sign. It's wanting to show others we share those values, like this is the fight of our generation, but not being willing to put the either the work or just kind of the emotional capacity to think about these big problems, right? Because it's very disheartening. And I think there's a big difference between some people that only organize online because that's what they can do. We have people that really don't want to go in the street and put themselves at risk, but actually do a lot of work behind the scenes on our website, on our newsletters, on social media. And so that's not activism. But then I've seen people, and sadly, including people that I'm, friends with more than organized with, that come to the strike to do a photo op, and then we'll put it online and we'll put a great caption about how we're going to change the world. But then I'll see them have very unsustainable practices, or I'll see them vote in a way that has really no alignment with the cause that they were just in the street for. And that definitely frustrates me. And I think that it's not only the youth that do that. I think everybody kind of has this illusion that the click is more powerful than it really is. And I'll be honest, it's hard to address it because you don't want to be angry at people for doing something, but it's also sometimes it's even more destructive than doing nothing because they go to bed thinking they did something. And,